we only get what we take, right? You know, someone can give you a lesson, 10 people can give you a lesson, but if you don't listen to it, it's not a lesson, right?
Oh, guys, we've got Peter Holmes here. I know he's been pretty quiet of late, but he's given us the time to have a bit of a quick chat. And welcome to the Thinking Man Business podcast, where we try and help men, number one, rediscover themselves, but also find their power within themselves, but also understand some of their misgivings. So, welcome, Pete, and thank you for coming on our podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, mate.
Yeah. So, firstly, give us a bit of a background. Where have you been? We've all been missing you. We haven't seen you for a long time. You've been, I don't know if you've been hibernating or doing whatever you can, but I'm glad we've got you out of wherever you've been, which is awesome. And just tell us what you want to tell us. That's all I want you to tell us.
Exactly. Oh, that's very nice. You've been missing me. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So I left Australia in about 2010 and went to live in France. I was raising my girls, who were 7.5 at that time. They were living with me. I wrote a book. I met an extraordinary photographer. I followed her to Africa. I lived in Nairobi. I released that book at the beginning of 2020. You might remember that year. It was just a couple of years ago. It might be a blur. If you go back a couple of years, it might be a blurry period in there. And it was just at the start of a thing at those days we used to call Corona. Yeah. And the book came out at the beginning of Corona, before Corona was COVID, and got absolutely squashed. I have had the pleasure of doing a bunch of different humanitarian work around the world. I've had amazing exposure to some of the most challenged countries and some of the most amazing people. I continue to write for the World Economic Forum in Geneva and Davos, and I'm building a private members club for the creative community in East Africa, or in Africa, where the rising creative community is one of the most exciting things that I have been part of. So that's a little bit of a story of my life.
Wow, that's a huge change from Sydney life, I guess. So how do you somehow justify or compare both facilities? I guess they've both got their positives and negatives, but I guess some of the perspective for some people living in Sydney right now.
Yeah, I guess, I couple of things. I went out I'm looking at these private members clubs and just seeing how they operate and who their customers are. So I've been looking at that. I've been in that deep dive. And some of them in England are pretty damn fancy. I sort of reached the conclusion that I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I used to say that because I'd had 4 amazing jobs.
Yeah.
The Rabbitohs, Brand Sydney, running the Australian Agricultural Company and producing comedians in New York. But now I reckon I'm the world's luckiest person because I can easily sleep on a dirty mattress in a refugee camp, and I can hang by the pool at a Soho house in London. I think that's what leads me to feel how sort of fortunate I am. It's not fortunate in the accumulation of things. It's not fortunate in which fancy people you know. I know heaps. Yeah. But it's the ability to be happy wherever you are. And I think that's what I'm really fortunate for. And I had a bit of that before in Australia, having grown up a bit in the country, having spent time in Aboriginal towns in the outback, having pretty centered parents. But I think I've been able to take it through my travels to another level over the last, decade or so. And I feel very fortunate for that.
And do you enjoy the anonymity a little bit, the solace of not being recognized, or I mean, does that help you a little bit in being able to conduct your business in a way, or do you? Do people?
I think about that. I do think about that, and I think that enables you to be a lot more present wherever you. Well, not you. It has enabled me to be a lot more present wherever I was, not thinking, about, how fantastic I was or how, fantastic someone else might think I was. It's just being me, wherever I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was helpful for me. I was under a spotlight as a kid before I knew I was under a spotlight.
Sure.
And so it sort of grew into my DNA without me noticing. And so I do think has been a benefit to that. I would like to think that with some more perspective and learning, I could have got there without that period of anonymity. You say that word for me. Yeah. So I think I would like it if it was that way. But my particular journey, this is the way it ended up. This is when I learned the lesson and how I learned the lesson, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. I guess for me as an outsider who only knows you from what the press has told me and from what I can read and from what I can see. We've never met face to face, and we've only met through Instagram and through WhatsApp chats and all this sort of stuff. And we're lucky to even have this chat right now because of conflicting agendas. But I guess the thing for me is now, as I meet you, I feel like a real humble person who's gone through different layers in life and now is really comfortable with who he is.
Well, I think I'm more comfortable than I've ever been. I don't want to say I'm there, and I don't believe anyone is there. I think there's the opportunity for improvement if you take it. Goes into your 80s. I was meant to have dinner with a guy in Zimbabwe, and we were driving a long way, and a lot of episodes on the road, and we didn't get to his house until 10:30 at night. And the guy was 84.
Right.
And he was up to meet us. His wife was up, and all the staff, that's how they live there, were up. And they said, well, you haven't eaten dinner. We're going to sit down and have dinner. And it's like 10 o'clock. He's 84. And so he goes, well, so it's 10 o'clock. So go and tidy up in your room, get changed, and we'll have a cocktail in the living room, and then we'll go in for dinner. We didn't sit down till 11 o'clock.
Oh,
I repeat, he's 84 years old. Now, the point of the story is that I'd been traveling. I hadn't seen this guy in 15, 20 years, perhaps. I knew him in Australia when he was, in his 60s. And I sat down at 11 o'clock at night, to have dinner. And what he did for the next hour was pepper me with questions about the state of Australia, about the state of the world. I'd just been to Davos. What did I think about the things? Now, he's 84 years old, living on a farm in Zimbabwe, and he was determined to learn, and grow and understand. And I think that's where I want to be when I'm 84. I want to be taking the, young man, the 40-year-old something, and I want to be out learning whatever I can from him, and I think, so I don't, I think I'm in a good place. but I love the idea of a commitment to lifelong learning.
That's so good, man. And I mean, hearing that story of somebody at 84 still having a zest for life like that, I mean, we all think sometimes, especially in Australia, 40, we hit 50, we start thinking, okay, it might be over. And we're just starting, aren't we?
Well, I remember the story, and she was an amazing, amazing woman. My grandmother, my mother's mother, and but when she got to 60, she put her bags, her travel bags, which was, days like a brown suitcase and a cloth-sided bag, and she put them away in the attic because she was like, well, that's me done with traveling. I'm 16 years old now. That's not what you do anymore. And I think if, we're going to have any chance at improving the direction of this planet, it's because people find it more enjoyable to stay involved and be involved, going a long way into the future. So, yeah, there's a bloody rugby league coach, Wayne Bennett, and I swear he's at the top of his game. He's about to launch a new club, and he is technically 104 years old. Like he's like there are not many trees older than Wayne Bennett in Australia, yet he's as good as they get in every way. So yeah, I just you got to have your health, you got to stay switched on, you got to stay engaged, you got to keep reading different shit. It's so easy to disappear at any age into a bubble, and some people they rob themselves because they get comfortable and they then start to only receive information inside that self-affirming bubble. So yeah, I just think, as I said, I'm happy with where I am, and I'm happy on the path I'm on.
No, well, that's brilliant to hear. But if you think about Wayne Bennett, what's one thing you could take out from Wayne Bennett as like just a human that you would say, I would take that signature,
right,
Wayne Bennett,
right,
and steal it.
Right. You have like the neatest living room I've ever seen. It's like it's got a white couch, all these pictures perfectly thing. It's like OCD much.
And
so
you see
neat there.
You see my beautiful son in the background?
No, I can see him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I think something that I learned from Russell, and then something I observed from Wayne, was how both of them saw players as individuals and really respected them as individuals. You even sometimes you read what who's going off to coach a new team next year. He'll always give a compliment to a player from another side, playing a game that he wasn't even involved in, but he sees the person, what they've overcome, who they are. Russell, that fabulous story, the Rabbitohs won the grand final in 2014. We had a, star hooker in Isaac Luke. He got suspended in the match before and couldn't play in the grand final. This young kid, Appy Coruscant, came in and played the deputy role, and he now plays State of Origin. But Appy, so it was but Luke was a huge part of the team. Yeah, there's a story about Russell giving his ring to Luke after the game, even though Luke hadn't played in the grand final. And I think both of those two men, are the type of managers who, in a sense, manage people rather than manage a business, and the business does well as a result of managing the people.
It's a byproduct, right? It's a byproduct, right?
It's a byproduct. It's an inevitable byproduct.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that was my skill in anything that had to do with management, is that I can work with people. I can't tell a machine, how to cut. I can't tell a cow how to grow. But I can have a chat with someone who's working on that to see what they do to do it. And I think if I was to get to the heart of people like Russell and Wayne Bennett, it's really it's really that seeing people as people and working with them. Yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, that's brilliant, mate. Look, I don't want to get into it too much because, like I said to you before we started, I'm not too interested in the footy stuff, but it'd be remiss of me to...
Hey, listen, mate. I think for some personal development, you should get into the Rabbitohs. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying,
No,
you could improve
it would be remiss of me if anyone sees this podcast and I don't ask a South question, then I'll probably be getting blasted for it. So I'm going to ask you, what do you actually miss about home and South, Russell, the whole thing? What do you miss about that the most?
Okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and my phone's already out of battery. So there you go. That's a bad sign.
Mate, this is what's classy about podcasts. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah. What? Well, first of all, I watch all the games.
Mate, I just want to say that I'm lovely to see you so comfortable the way you are, and you don't give a crap. It's so good.
Yeah. I watch all the games and I watch them without tension, right? Yeah. So that's actually a really enjoyable way. When I used to watch games when I was involved in the club, I'd be like, oh, shit, that player had a great game. That's really bad timing in his contract negotiation. That game's going to cost us $100,000. And I'm not being a bastard, but you're thinking other things,
yes,
right?
Of course.
Or someone has a great game and they're going elsewhere next season. You're like, ah, shit, we shouldn't have let him go. Yeah. And then you got a sponsor in the box, and you're like, please, can we win this game so that we can sign this deal? Please, it's really important. So I used to watch with a whole different, set of eyes. Now I just get to watch, as a fan, and I love that. So, I think I was lucky enough to get that insight into the lives of players and into, how things really worked. And I was telling some stories to some English people this weekend. I'm in England and I'm like, they were talking rugby. So I started talking rugby league and why I technically think it's a better sport. And why it's got, a better heritage, a more inclusive heritage. But I was talking about, some of the Islander players that are playing in the competition at the moment. And they're expressing themselves, they're dancing to music. They're so proud of their Islander culture. I could tell a similar story about Indigenous players and their culture. But, before I was like officially evolved in South, I went to see a game at Manly with the Rabbitohs at Manly. And I went to the dressing rooms, and it was before the game, and the Islander players were having a prayer before the game.
Mm-hmm.
Prayer means a lot to them, and they're having a prayer before the game. Only there wasn't any space made for it, so they were doing their prayer in the toilet before the game. They went into the urinals, and they were standing in the urinals because the only space they had, which was it was unintentionally. No one was doing it on purpose to send them into the toilets, but it was like, here's a group who we know like to pray before a game. Are we making space for them to do that? So to go from that time where the Islander players, had find their own space, to a place now where you've got Islander players. If you look at what the guys from Penrith are doing, the Islander players are just having so much fun around the game and bringing something to it. I think that's an extraordinary thing, and I've loved watching that.
That's brilliant. So, okay, moving on from from football. Actually, before you move on from football, do you still stay in touch with Russ and South and all that sort of stuff, or you don't really get involved too much?
I don't get involved at all. I said I was going to go away and be a fan from day one, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm just a fan, and yeah, Russell and I trade messages, and I sent one to him today about something brilliant he did. So yeah, I'm just a nutty fan who believes the ref is cheating and sell the Roosters. That's what they like. That's the way I live.
Well, just like I am, I haven't been able to support a team since the Steelers left, so that's just me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
that's how,
Exactly.
that's how
Yeah.
I live. But talk to me more about living in Africa, finding your wife. That's an artist now. She's obviously given you a whole new lease on life somehow with her creativity. Can you explain that to me somehow? Because that's difficult
Yeah, I don't.
at a
I
late
mean,
age.
I think one of the interesting phrases in there that you used, and we use it. I'm not saying you used it intentionally, but um, when someone gives you a new lease on life, I think we only get what we take, right? Someone can give you a lesson. 10 people can give you a lesson, but if you don't listen to it, it's not a lesson, right? And
So,
so, I think the approach and what I'm doing, it actually started when I first went and lived in rural France, and that was like the quietest place I'd ever been. And I was living in rural France in the Loire Valley, and it's sort of known for being, a beautiful area. But I was actually living in a very I was living in a very poor area, and it's hard to believe in France these days, but my neighbor didn't have a toilet. Like they peed in a bucket,
wow,
right?
wow.
Um, and it was properly poor. But the thing that was clear from there was the appreciation of work. Like, God, they did their work well. They took so much pride in their work, and that's a lot of what my book was about. Is the pride that people take in work and the fulfillment they get out of it. And I'm not. This is a farmer. These are bicycle makers. These are stonemasons. But just doing things really well, and I think that's one of the things that I learned most there, which is separated from the status that we normally give in our world, where at the top of the pile are politicians or bankers or doctors or lawyers.
Hmm.
There's some sort of natural hierarchy in our society, and you try and push your kids up that actually what we should be looking to do is push our kids along whatever area they're in. Be a barista, but
Yeah,
be one that friggin' cares about what he does. Be
exactly.
one that is like so clear about what that person normally orders and how you can make it, what you can deliver, and da da da. And because I think there's more happiness to be found in that um, than elsewhere. I think that's where there's more happiness to be found, or more like happiness is more likely to be found there than pushing up in a hierarchy which has been assigned principally by society or your family.
So if I press you again and tell me to stop, right? Once you accepted her love, right? How
Yeah.
was that?
Oh, you're talking about Alyssa in Africa?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I got off on the. Oh, yeah, sorry, went off on a
I know,
tangent. You have to
I know
excuse me.
you've got the, I know
Did
you've got
you?
the book.
Did
So
you?
everyone's
Did
read the
you
book.
explain to? Do you explain to people it's 41 degrees in London? I'm sitting on the
Hey,
floor of the house I'm in because
by
it's
the way, yeah, it's
so
41 degrees in London, and everyone's freaking out. By the way, so
it's freaking out. But because it's not built for this heat, the
yeah,
thing is made of concrete and blackness.
yeah,
Apparently it's going to feel like 46 because
yeah.
the ground is so hot.
Because
So I'm
London's
literally
made to be
sitting
a
on the floor.
London's made to be a furnace, and then now we're putting a furnace
Yes,
on a furnace.
yeah, exactly. So I'm the coolest place in this house is sitting on the floor wearing a singlet. So um, uh, yeah. So Alyssa's work, I really saw her when I first met her as a conflict zone photographer, someone who had lived and worked in Iraq and Afghanistan and Congo and Darfur and one conflict after another, the more I got to understand her, I realized she was actually an artist. She
Yeah.
was an artist that worked. She was an artist that worked in inconvenient locations.
Yes.
And so she's really an artist. She opened her first show at the Venice Biennale this year. And, her work has been about portraying people who are traditionally defined by the conflict in their countries. So we tend to think of someone in Iraq as someone at war, or someone in Afghanistan as someone who's suffering, or someone in, Ethiopia as someone who's starving. But what she has been really, what she does, which I don't think she can do anything different, by the way, because she looks and sees the humanity in people, and portrays that. And I think, that's been a wonderful lesson to, expand out from, the communities I knew from, whether it was, Maroubra in Sydney, or Redfern in Sydney, or, outback Aboriginal towns, to keep expanding outwards and find that the principles are all the same. No matter where you go, people would like a better life for their kids, would like to do more meaningful work themselves, would like to have a beer on Friday night with their mates. Very simple principles that are found everywhere. But what Alyssa's work does is she goes into places where you don't expect to find dignity, you don't expect to find beauty. Everyone in Gaza must be a terrorist. Everyone in Israel must be firing at the terrorists, or everyone in Gaza, and finds the humanity there, which of course is there, because it's there everywhere you look.
Yeah. Isn't that an amazing perspective? And we get in Australia because we've got such different demographics and different ethnicities and all that sort of stuff. But I think Africa is almost another level again.
Yeah, it is, and it's also because it's even more nuanced than country, because it's got country, and then it's got tribe.
Yeah.
So it's got a whole different level of it's got a whole different level of tribal differences, and and some of that's quite raw. Some of that's quite raw. Like it's not. What's your background, mate? What's your
My background
family's background?
Yugoslavian, Macedonian. So
yeah, right. So you couldn't it's still not. It's not cool anymore in Australia to say, the Slavs are, they're really good at, picking, cabbage, right? But when I grew up, that's like,
yeah, right.
that's like,
yeah.
that's like, and
or whatever, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But in a lot of the African tribes where they haven't had as much exposure to multicultural living, they'll flat out tell you that person from that tribe cannot be trusted because people from that tribe can't be trusted. It's like they just believe that to be the case. Now they haven't had. I don't believe that people know this. I believe that people only get it through lived experience, because we're designed to protect ourselves from the other. On the whole, the tribe that looked different from us wanted our girls and our goats. So we were built that way. So our initial response to the other is wariness, and that's cool. Wariness is not necessarily a bad thing. That gets turned into myth and rules. This tribe is lazy, that tribe steals money, that tribe only likes land, that likes to buy fancy car. All those things get built into a myth. Now, when I grew up in Australia, we had those same myths, about, they were like writ so large, about, every ethnic group, had a stereotype. And over time they get busted. And then we realize through experience that actually, there is nothing that is different, that defines any individual person in that group.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I just think Africa's just it'll work its way out, but it's just going to take a longer period of time because it's got its, like you said, it's got its it's got its groups and it's got its stoic individuals that are still there, I guess.
Yeah. The other way to look at Africa's development, and flip it around a little bit, is that, so I'm living in Kenya. Most of the African countries that have a democracy are like 50 years into their democracy, right?
Right.
Most of the African countries there have got universities that are, 100 years old. That's sort of the oldest, or 50 years old, So 50 years after, democracy came to France and America, 50 years after that, they were war-torn, let's use the words. What is the word of Donald Trump? War-torn shitholes.
Yeah.
That's what those countries were like 50 years after. So we've got to compare Africa not to us, 1,000 years after Oxford University was created in London, 250 years since there was the principles of democracy established. We're going to compare Africa now, actually getting to where we are a lot quicker than we did. We got there. It took us years, and you still got a guy like Boris Johnson running England, Donald Trump. Are we perfect? So I think there's a and Africa has a little bit of a problem with very powerful foreign forces, companies, and countries meddling in their affairs, and they're pretty powerful. And a lot of the value goes offshore, sadly, so the money doesn't get captured in the country. But there's so much good that's happening. That's what I'm excited about.
Well, it's also, it's number one. It's brilliant to hear, but it's also gives you perspective on life. So whenever you do come back to Australia, or you do go back to England like you are now, or you go to another place, it gives you such wonderful perspective to be able to life.
Now listen, when you say when I come back to Australia, mate, I would have come back, but you shut the borders. You notice that? You shut the borders. I feel like I tell this story. People say, like, are you, you in Australia, how you doing? How's the relationship going? And I'm like, well, I used to feel like we had something special. I really felt like I loved Australia, and I thought Australia loved me. And then one time I went to go, and she'd closed the door on me.
But they've changed.
I get the feeling she didn't. I know, but I'm still pissed off. And I understand why they did it. I get it. But it was just I understand why Australia did it. Please don't get me wrong. We'll know what the right COVID response was in about 20 years, right? So let's not jump to any conclusions. I know why Australia did it. It just felt a little strange for me.
Horrible. Let's be honest. It felt horrible.
Yeah.
You can't go back into your own country. Like, seriously. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that would feel horrible. But I just, I know you've got a call coming up in about 5 minutes' time.
Yeah.
I just thank you for your time. We could talk it feels like we talk for ages. I can't wait till you come back, or we could do this again at some point in time. But
I'm happy to do it again. Mate.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I think men starting more so-called sensitive conversations, and I think that's leadership, man. And I think that's really exciting. I don't even know why I'm on this show. You sent me a message and I said yes. I can't remember why I'm on the show.
The last question I normally ask is, like, if you could give another man advice around mental health or around some of the journeys that you've been through in life, what would be the context that you'd put that in, or what would be some of the verbiage? And I know it's very difficult to put you in that.
Right. So you're asking me a giant question right before we get off the call.
Yes, I am. Absolutely am. I am.
Yeah. That's where you say, mate.
You're a lot.
That's where you say. Yeah, that's where you say. That's where I say. Hey, mate, that's a great question. I don't want to. I don't want to answer that without giving it some some real thought. Because I was always taught that you never give advice. You never give advice or tell people what to do because it might not fit them. You only share from personal experience, and the
Sure.
people can pick out of that what they want.
Yeah.
So, on the next time I'm on your show, why
Yeah.
don't we talk about my personal experience with men's mental health?
Have you
Coming
had
up soon
have
on
you had that
yourpodcast.com.
have you had that experience?
Yeah, I've had a version of everything, mate. I've
Okay,
done
well,
everything.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
So let's do it.
guys, I just want you all to hear that it's not just us; it's everybody that goes through this sort of stuff. Peter Holmes the Court, one of the most influential men in Australia at some point in time, right, has gone through some of this. So we will revisit this.
Oh, shit, mate.
Um,
Shit, mate. Let me just tell you, I've been through a bunch of it.
yeah,
And I've been through a bunch of it. And I'm really happy to share my experience, right? And
I can't
I'm not
wait.
going to give advice, but
Yeah,
I'll be really happy to give an experience. So that'll come up on
on the next
episode
episode.
2 in a couple of months.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay,
You
mate.
get to interview.
Thank you.
You're important. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Take
Okay.
care. See you,
Thanks
mate.
a lot. Bye.